So good morning, everyone, to this month's Edge Talk, Friday the 3rd of February 2017. Today we have really two great people, Kevin and Claire, who are going to be discussing around the subject democracy, freedom and work, enabling better health and care. If you're joining in today, please feel free to use our chat box, which is normally in the bottom right-hand corner of the WebEx platform, where you can continuously contribute to any conversations or questions that you might have that are brought up by the thought-provoking comments that Kevin and Claire are going to have. Also, please connect with people externally to this WebEx using the hashtag edgetalks on Twitter and using our two accounts, School for Radicals and @TheEdgeNHS. We also have a Facebook group for the School for Health and Care Radicals and the Edge NHS, so please take a search for those on Facebook and join us on there. So thank you to all who have joined us live, and for those who will be watching this on catch-up, we look forward to having more conversations after this session. Just to introduce ourselves, hello, my name is Dominic Cushnan, and I will be chairing today's session. We also have Paul Woodley. Paul is going to be our chat room monitor, and anybody that's having any technical issues, Paul is our man to go to. Lee Kendall will be supporting us on the Twitter today and bringing any conversations that are happening externally back into this WebEx. And we also have our two great presenters, Claire Haigh and Kevin Wyke. Claire is an explorer, shape and connector. She's really good at connecting with lots of individuals, and she's a co-founder of Collaborating Out Loud. You can follow Claire on Hey Claire on Twitter, and Kevin Wyke is also the founder of a director of Live Further, and is also a co-founder of Collaborating Out Loud, which you can follow on hashtag #CollabOutLoud. You can also follow Kevin and his tweets at Kevin Wyke. So now I'm going to hand over to Claire, who's going to take us off on this journey around democracy in the workplace.
Thanks, Dominic. Well, it's great to be with you today, and I'm just delighted that Kevin and myself have the opportunity to share some of our ideas and thoughts with you around democracy, freedom and work, and actually how can that enable us to provide better health and care, and not just health and care with health and social care, but actually broader into public services. So I'm just delighted that we're able to do this, and we really want this to be a conversation. So we're going to check in with you on social media throughout today, and really kind of want to do this to be the start of conversation around how we can think about some of this stuff quite differently, and we'd love to hear examples where people are doing this. So before Kev kicks off, I'm just going to go over what we're going to do today, how we're going to kind of run it, and then I'll pass over to my lovely colleague, Kev. So I guess the first place we wanted to start was around democracy, freedom. What do we mean by democratic and freedom-based organisations, and what's that all about, really? Some principles behind that, and how does that play out? So Kevin's going to take you through that. I'm then going to talk about the social age. There's some brilliant work by a great guy called Julian Stodd, who I'm hoping is joining us in some way on the chat, or at least later on Twitter, around actually the social age that we're now living in and working in is actually redefining how we work, and actually it's helping to support that need for freedom and democracy. So we'll just talk through some of that and how that links in with the multiple generations we've got in today's workplace and social platforms, and how we can utilise all those things. So really interested, I'll take you through that and why that's important for the NHS, for social care and public services. We'll then look at actually all this stuff then, what is the impact of that on health and care, and actually how do we start to do some of this, how do we start to make it real. And then Kevin and I want to share some of our ideas, some of our thoughts around collaborating out loud. So as Dominic said, we've co-founded this thing called Collaborating Out Loud. I'd say it's an experiment, and we'll talk through that, but we want to share what we're learning around freedom, democracy and collaboration through that process. So as I said, it's a conversation, really like you to be involved, and yeah, over to Kevin really to start us off by talking about what do we mean by democracy and freedom at work.
Brilliant. Right, thanks Claire for the fab introduction. As I thought about how could I explain what I meant and what excited me about democracy at work. I realised I'd had quite a journey over the last 5 or 6 years, and there'd been some important players in that journey, some important actors in that journey. And so I thought that actually the best way of describing what I mean by democracy at work was probably to introduce you to these people that have inspired me, and these people that have probably given me my best idea of what I think that freedom at work, democracy at work is, and why I think it's so important. So the story actually starts with me. Quite obviously, none of those are me in that slide, but I have got background as a clinician in the NHS as an audiologist. I ended up my kind of frontline NHS career in education, learning, organisational development, in a very traditional organisation that I was hugely frustrated at working in. It was a very traditional organisation, but had a lot of kind of fear around it, a lot of constraints. It didn't feel like an organisation where you could really, really thrive. And that was hugely frustrating for me. And at that time, with all that frustration around me, I came across this book. I'm sure many of you have probably read it or come across it. It's a book called Maverick by Ricardo Semler. And it's the story of Semler's own story about how he took over a traditional manufacturing organisation at the age of 21. His family organisation took it over from his father, and how he changed completely how that organisation ran, from a very traditional hierarchical organisation to a really radical freedom-based organisation. Semler's story is a really great story. It's a brilliant book because I think it's a very real book. It doesn't glorify what he's doing. It doesn't paint it as the only way of doing things and as an easy ride. It explores a very interesting journey that he went on, introducing some very, very kind of democratic principles into a very, very traditional organisation. I found it really, really inspiring. A couple of the little stories that he tells in the book I think are worth me repeating, just because I think they kind of indicate the sorts of things that are important in organisations that really value the people that work in the organisations. One thing Semler did during his journey of changing how Semco, the organisation he was CEO of, how it worked, was to actually move to a system where the teams that were on the production lines set their own targets, their own quotas, and their own reward. Now, at the time that he was doing this, he was told that he was bonkers, that he was mad, that the people that were working on the workshop were lazy, that the people on there were greedy. But he had a belief that actually, if he gave them the system where they understood how the organisation worked, had enough clarity about how the financials flowed and all that sort of stuff, these people would be committed to doing the right thing, and that he would have great faith and trust in them. So he did. So he's really brave. He set out to give people the chance to set their own targets, rewards and quotas. And surprisingly, to some people at least, they set harder targets than they would have done otherwise. Set harder quotas for themselves, and they continually strived to exceed those quotas. And they set reward that was appropriate for how the organisation was doing as a whole organisation and how their teams were doing as a team. Really interesting that at times when the organisation went through some recession, that the decision of the local teams was not to make people redundant, but to reduce reward and reduce their time. So actually giving people the authority and the power to make their own decisions. Semler's idea that actually they'd make the right decisions was proven true. The other thing that I think is really interesting about Semco as well was in terms of how it promoted and hired people. Again, Ricardo Semler gave permission and power to the people at the front line to make the decisions for hiring. So if you joined Semco, it was the team that you were joining who decided whether you were coming in or not. And if you're promoted in Semco, it's the team you're joining that decides whether you get the promotion or not. This was revolution to me. It was absolutely brilliant. It was from the 1980s, it was from Brazil, it was from manufacturing, but at least it gave me a new model to start thinking about how work could be organised and how organisations could work. And then I met this bloke, and I actually did meet this bloke. I haven't had the pleasure of seeing or meeting Ricardo Semler, but I did meet this guy. This is Henry Stewart, or Happy Henry, as he's kind of commonly known. And he runs an organisation called Happy Computing. And I met him when I first got connected to World Blue, an organisation I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. And Henry's absolutely fab. When I met him at his offices in London, he was walking around the offices in his socks, and he had a big smile on his face, and he was just full of energy. And he tells me that wasn't always the case. He originally started in the newspaper industry and in a very, very traditional environment that was full of bullying, fear, all that sort of stuff. And it didn't go particularly well for him, got made redundant at some stage, started his own business and decided at that point he would always run it differently. He would always run it the way he wanted work to be. Because actually, why shouldn't you be happy at work? So he founded Happy Computing, which has grown hugely over the time that it's been boss. And there's a couple of things about Happy that I love about it, that Henry talks about that's just absolutely fab. One thing is, at Happy Computing, you choose your own boss. I think this is amazing. You get to choose who you think will help you do your work the best, which is brilliant. So good bosses tend to have loads of people saying, can you be my boss? Can you be my manager? I want you to help me be my manager. And interestingly, people who aren't necessarily the best managers, well, quite obviously they don't get people asking to be managers, but they get the opportunity to do something different. It tends to, what Henry's found is it tends to be the case that people who are less enthusiastic or have less energy for people management aren't chosen, and that's because they want to do something different. So you get to choose your own boss at Happy Computing. And another thing I really like about Henry as well is he tries to absolutely give power right to the people in the front line. You choose what work you do, you choose where you put your energy, and in fact he's got a process that he calls pre-approval. If he or any of the other people that are managing staff ask them to do something, that assumes then that whatever they come up with is the right answer and they can go and do it. So there's no second guessing, there's no asking people to come back and tell me what you've come up with and I'll tell you whether that's right or wrong. So he thinks management is about supporting people and then getting out of the way and letting them get on with it. There's an assumption of trust right from the moment that you join Happy Computing, and Henry's a joy, absolute joy to listen to and talk to about how you make a happy, engaging workplace. So having met Happy Henry, I then met this guy as well, and this is Bob Doak. Bob Doak is a dour Scotsman, and I met him at a conference called the Meaning Conference down in Brighton, and this conference talks about all sorts of interesting things about how we bring meaning to work. And Bob was really inspirational because he's got this very dour kind of presentational style, and then what he talks about is absolutely fab and inspirational. Bob works for a company that you probably all know, and probably most of you have some of the products in your wardrobe or hanging up by the front door somewhere, because he works for Gore, W.L. Gore, the people who make Gore-Tex. I didn't know very much about W.L. Gore before I met Bob, but what I found out was they are a really interesting organisation. They have very small teams, a lattice structure, very little management structure, and they are hugely innovative. There's an assumption at Gore that that they hire you because you are intelligent, you have ideas, that you're creative, and they ask you to come into Gore and find out where you want to place that creativity, that energy, and find your own way. So this lattice organisation doesn't have managers in the traditional sense. It has sponsors, people that can help you to make your inspiration become real. It runs by a number of principles, 4 main principles that Bob talks about. Freedom, the freedom to choose who we come in contact with, to choose what we do in work, and to choose the way we do it. Fairness, fairness to each other, fairness to everyone within the organisation, and fairness to everyone outside the organisation, including all the people that supply them and that they supply, and the communities that they work within. Commitment, the ability to make your own commitments to what you're going to do at work. So you don't get told what to do, you make your own commitment. But something interesting as well that Bob really talks about is that that only works with the connection to responsibility. So being absolutely responsible for what your commitments are, and responsible for the impact that your commitments might have on the organisation. And so the last of the principles is consultation. If you make any decisions that might impact the reputation of the organisation, that you should consult with your associates, with your peers, and before you actually go ahead with it. That doesn't mean you don't do it. That means you check and you ask. So Bob was really inspirational as well, and kind of taught me a little bit about this thing that I've come across, this bit of democracy, this movement that I was starting to see, that's first come across in a book from the 1980s in Brazil, and then seen in a kind of boutique organisation that was about techie in London, could actually play out in a large organisation that was about innovation. And it wasn't a free-for-all, it was something that also had responsibility with it as well. And then the last of the people I just want to introduce you to in this kind of section is a guy called Gary Ridge. And Gary Ridge is a really interesting Australian who I met in Miami at a conference I was at in Miami, which was very lucky to get to. And Gary's bonkers. He's cheesy. He's engaging. He's an entertaining bloke, and he's the chief exec of an organisation that's mission statement is creating lasting memories. The organisation that he's the chief exec of is WD-40, the people who make oil in cans. And what I couldn't believe was the amount of passion that Gary has about what they do. They actually talk about WD-40 as being a tribe. They use a lot of folklore, they use a lot of tribal imagery, they have, Gary actually wears tribal robes, which is amazingly cheesy as well. But, and he talks about WD-40 as this place where they make lasting memories, which if you can find such passion and purpose in an organisation that makes oil, what can you do in an organisation that helps people to be well, a healthcare organisation or social care organisation? He is cheesy. He does wear tribal robes. He does talk about all sorts of things that you might cringe at. But when they do their staff surveys, 98% of staff say, "I love to tell people I work for WD-40." 92% say, "I have the freedom to decide how to accomplish my objectives." 96% say, "I respect my coach," and 99% say, "My opinions and values are a good fit at WD-40. What would we pay for, for that sort of engagement? And he works for a company that makes oil in cans. So as part of this journey, one of the things that kind of connected most of these people together was an organisation that I came across called World Blue. And World Blue are an organisation that helps to accredit freedom-based and democratic workplaces and organisations, and it has some aspirations to have 1 billion people in democratic workplaces and freedom-based workplaces where we pay attention to and value the people that work in them. They've got some principles which I really like because they're kind of a really good description of what a freedom-based or democratic organisation might be. It's not the only way of doing it, There's all sorts of other principles and stuff out there. There's teal organisations, Frederick Laloux's Reinventing Organisations book and Holacracy are all ways of thinking about democracy at work. I quite like this because it's fairly straightforward and I can understand it. So purpose and vision. Organisations that get this have a real clear purpose. They know what the star is that they're following. Transparency. Organisations that get this are open with their information. What Semler found at Semco was that if we tell people what's really going on with the money, they make really good decisions. Dialogue and listening. Democratic organisations are all about having conversations, human-to-human conversations that mean that you both talk and listen. They're also about fairness, about treating everybody equally and treating everybody well and treating everybody with dignity. Democratic organisations also have accountability, not in a blame kind of way though, but this is about taking responsibility for the decisions that we make. Democratic organisations are about both us as individuals and knowing and recognising us as human beings, and also about the collective that we work for. It's about choice, about giving employees, the people that work in democratic organisations, choice. And it's about doing that with integrity. Decentralisation is about pushing our decision making as far to the front as we can. And reflection and evaluation is recognising that this is a continual learning experience, that we continue to reflect on what we do, how we've done, and where we can go next. One of the things that I have found that virtually all of the organisations that I've been inspired by have is unconditional or almost unconditional trust in the people that work for them. So when they hire people, they trust that they've hired the right people. When they ask people to do stuff, they trust that those people will do the right things. And when people, whenever people are there in the organisations to do work, they're trusting that they're making the right decisions at that time. So trust, I think, is a real important factor within all of these democratic organisations. So I hope that gives you an idea through that journey of the people that I've met of what I think democratic organisations are. I'm going to hand back to Claire now. I think we're going to have a little bit of a pause while we kind of just have a look and see what's on the chat and what's on Twitter, and then Claire's going to talk about some of the social environment that we're working in that kind of influences this too.
Yeah, thank you, Kev. Really appreciate that. Some really good lessons to be learned from many organisations there. I'm going to ask Paul first, and then we're going to hand over to Lee, just going to get some feedback and see what kind of things are coming out of the conversations as you guys are having this session. Paul, do you want to do a quick summary as to what you're finding on the conversations and your direct messages and your messages on the chat box here?
Okay, thank you. It's people seem to be resonating a lot with the ideas you're talking about, and there's a lot of love for the idea. You can tell by the tone of the conversation. There's quite a lot of banter. We've got a couple of useful messages. Kara's suggested that we look at the Burzog model as well, and then Kate's posted up the link to the Happy Manifesto that you were talking about. So if people want to know more detail, if you scroll up the chat, you'll be able to find that.
Yeah, there's definitely some links that I've got to the Happy Manifesto. Happy Henry's written a book with 10 principles of happy organisations, which is ace, absolutely brilliant as well. And there's lots to find about. He's very open about how he's worked. And Happy Manifesto is a really good read. And Burzog, we'll come to them in a minute. What I've avoided in this first section is talking about organisations that are in the area that we're working in health and social care. And there's a couple of examples, and Burzog are one of them that we'll come to a bit later, definitely. So yeah, and it's interesting to see, I'm just scrolling through, seeing lots of people having experiences of Burzog and seeing Joss de Block, and maybe even trying some of the stuff out, which would be really interesting to hear how that's going from people.
That's good.
Lee, over to you.
Good morning, all. It's been great so far, thank you. And people on Twitter are really enjoying hearing what you've been saying, Kev, about the examples and sharing those fab pictures of the inspirational individuals that you've put on your presentation. So yeah, people really enjoying soaking up all of the things you're talking about.
Great. There's yeah, some people posting some great pictures as well. All of the organisations I've talked about, there are plenty of links to what they're doing. So somehow or other we can put those together so people can access them quite easily as well after this session. I'm sure you do that anyway, but yeah, so there will be stuff that people can get to that gives you a bit more detail of actually what these organisations are doing, because they're all really interesting.
Yes, and people have been sharing as well. They've heard about the organisation, so it's really resonating with people, and I think people are really eager to hear more.
Thank you, Lee. And yes, we'll add those all onto the Edge website after this session, and we've uploaded the videos as well. Claire, are you there? Are you okay to
Can you
come in
see
now?
me? Can you see me? Yeah.
Yes, we can see you.
Yes, fabulous. Yes, I'm here. Good. Brilliant.
Hi,
right,
hi,
I'm
Claire.
ready to get going.
Just going to hand you over.
Brilliant. I've got a slight technical issue with the slides, everyone, so I'm just going to have to say next so Paul can change them over for me. So yes, fabulous. Thank you, Paul. So yeah, and I really resonate with what Kevin said as well. And this is a topic that, in the same way as Kevin, to me, it's something that I've kind of been exploring for quite a long time. And the bit that I now want to kind of focus on for you is actually, okay, so we've got these great organisations and these individuals and these examples of where this is happening, but there's a much bigger context and a bigger picture in which the world is changing that actually enables us and actually tells us now is the time to embrace and do this work more. So I can hear some typing. I don't know what that is. Is some typing? Yes, stop now. Don't know what that was. Okay, sorry, it was just really off-putting. Okay, so social age. I'm going to talk about the social age. I'm going to talk about what do we mean by that. And I was really lucky to meet Julian Stodd. Actually, the day after, I decided to go and work for myself, and he absolutely inspired me with his passion, his energy for this work. And I think that Julian's work is inspirational in this area, so I would suggest you go and find out more. What I'm going to talk about today is a snapshot of the richness that Julian gives around this. So I'll talk through what do we mean by the social age and what came before the social age. I'm going to talk about the new and old power paradigm, because I think that's quite important in this piece of work as well. And Helen Bevan talks about this a lot. But actually, I just want to revisit that, because actually the power hierarchy and the structures that we had are actually kind of coming into friction and into contact with a very different way of working. What does that mean for democracy and freedom at work? Looking at the power of social platforms, not just social media, but actually how does that democratize how we work, how we do things differently. And then going to go through looking at some of the stuff around, we're working in a multi-generational workplace. What does that mean for how we work, for democracy, for freedom at work, and how things are shifting? And that's not about typecasting generations, because I don't think that's helpful, but it's very much about how can we embrace that. So if we could just flick to the next slide, Paul, thank you very much. So this is a brilliant animation by Julian. His drawings of his work are amazing, and I'm using a few here, but definitely go and have a look on his blog. So this kind of looks at, there's kind of these 4 ages: industrial, knowledge, digital, and social. So what I'm going to talk about mainly is we're in the social age. But actually, to be able to do that, it's important to understand kind of what's come before, and because actually some of that stuff that came before is leaving a legacy and is still hanging around in this new age. It's not that everyone's in the social age and everything's moved forward, so it's really important to understand what came before. And so the manufacturing age, as it says, making things, creating products, producing things, big factories, structure, formality. People went to work at a time, did a shift, came home. It was very structured, hierarchical. We had kind of management control structures, levers were pulled and things were made. So very kind of process-driven, operationalised. And that kind of served us really well at that time because it helped us to grow, it helped us to become stronger as societies. And then we moved into a knowledge age, and in this age, innovation was the thing everyone talked about. Innovation of ideas and how could we innovate, do things differently. Knowledge became the currency, knowledge became something that people sought out, that people saw as powerful, that people traded in, that was kind of shared within limits, kind of within parameters of kind of knowledge was maybe controlled by few rather than the many. So then you had the digital age, so 1970s onwards kind of time, I'd kind of say. We all started to get computers. We all started to embrace technology. We all started to think about, actually, there's these things now that enable us to get access to information, to share that information, and that trajectory has just gone huge. So I can remember as a child having computers where you had kind of tapes and you literally had to put a tape in the computer. It made this hideous noise for sort of 20 minutes. And then this sort of game appeared, which was okay, but slightly disappointing for the 20-minute wait. So actually, I've got a watch and a phone that literally does everything I want it to do now. So I think there's something really interesting about the speed in which we've now got technology that's very portable and very usable. So that takes us into the social age. So the social age, for me, is really exciting, but it's a time of change, which also means it could be a time of friction, a time of challenge as well. But actually, let's see it as an opportunity. I'm an optimist, and yes, things aren't always perfect, and things are challenging. But if we can embrace the social age and what that means, we have a massive opportunity for the NHS, for public services in general, and this so links into the stuff Kevin talked about around World Blue, but for teal organisations, all of the stuff around how we do this in organisations. This is happening around organisations. So what does the social age look like? Well, the social age is around agility. So actually being able to shift and move, be agile, and be able to respond to what's happening, because actually things are changing so much. We are connected in ways that we have never been connected before. We are able to share information. We are able to engage with people all over the world if we want to. So it's an age of actually agility and engagement. It's an age where applied learning is much more valuable than kind of just information or knowledge. So we value much more what we can do and what we can apply and what we can use, which is really important. There's a notable shift in power in the social age. So it's not about a few people having a lot of power, it's about lots of distribution of power. And again, this sits so nicely with all the stuff around the health and social care radical schools, health of the social movement. How do we use these principles? How do we really start to think about doing things very differently with communities? And that's the next point. It's about communities. It's about communities and sharing. About co-creating and collaboration. My favourite word. Anybody that's connected me on Twitter, it's collaboration this and collaboration that. But actually, for me, it's around sharing in communities. We have this notion around, oh well, in the good old days when we all had communities and we worked together, that was really important. But actually, I think there's something around. It's not about necessarily the person next door in your street, in your community, but people crave community. People crave that sense of wanting to have something very different. So that's why you see things like mumpreneurs, I think somebody was telling about yesterday, and all these communities and mumsnet, and they spring up online, but then actually what starts to happen they meet physically well in sort of clusters across the country. So there's a real need for community, a real need for that. And I think one of the things that Julian talks about, actually, it's a changing time, and how we relate as communities and create meaning is really important. And this is the point for me. In the social age, meaning is something people are looking for, because actually it was much more simpler previously. So you had your work, you had your home life, you had your family, you had your friends. Actually, you couldn't connect to the entire world from your kitchen table like you can now. So life is simpler, life is less complex in many ways. And actually now people are looking for meaning, and what does it mean, and actually what does it mean to work, what does it mean to have personal life, are they separate, are they different? And actually that's the whole characteristic of the social age. It's not about work's one thing, personal another. It's about actually we've got an opportunity here, and we've got one life, and it's connected together. So just some characteristics here around the social age. Engagement is key. Kevin's already talked about this in his slides about engagement levels, about consultation, about consulting people on what's going on. People can engage on any topic they want, anywhere, on social media, through communities, online platforms, all sorts of ways. And actually people now want that engagement in the workplace. They want to be asked their opinion. They want to actually shift and move and help to make things better for engagement. Informal tech's really key as well. So actually we've got access to technology everywhere, and how we use that to do things, to share things, to co-create. Some things about, I talked a little bit about subverting hierarchies. It's really interesting, this to me. So in the industrial age, we had these hierarchies. We had the foreman who told us what to do, and everybody kind of complied and did that. The social age is quite different to that. Actually, we've got more of a democratized system where people actually have a chance to share their opinions in very free and open ways, and the consequences are quite different. So in the past, it might have been, okay, it's a job for life, so I can't speak up, or I don't want to share my opinion, I need to make sure that I kind of hold the position. Whereas people move around and shift now in a way that they didn't before, and they're not loyal for many years in the way that they used to be. I think one of the things on here that I really like around the social age is it's owned. So it's owned by many people. It's kind of created and shaped by many people. And I think that's really important. And I think the thing about extended and expanded as well, I think that's really essential for thinking about this. And that is that point of there is a massive world out there, a massive world of opportunity, of things we can do. And that's brilliant, but that's also really quite scary. It's like, where do you go? What do you do? Who do you connect with? You could spend your entire life just following a hashtag to a hashtag. But actually, there's something about what's the meaning for you and what's the meaning for the communities you're part of. The social age is a really exciting time, a time where we learn very differently, we connect, we collaborate, we co-create together. And if we can embrace that in our workplace and those principles, then actually it's a really powerful place to be. Can we just go to the next slide, please, Paul? Thank you. Fab. So, new old power paradigms and the values of both of those. This is Harvard Business Review literature and research. And this won't be unfamiliar to many of you, because I know this is talked about a lot in the Horizons work. But for me, I just wanted to come to this because I think this reinforces the social age thinking, and this is what is going on in the social age. So we kind of talk about things like management, and we talk about actual exclusivity, and we talk about all these things, and these hierarchies, and we talk about kind of few having power. We talk about authority, we talk about lots of different parts of the system being separate. We talk about professionalism, we talk about specialisation. Actually, all these things were great and served us well at a time, and we still need elements of these today, and that is not what I'm saying, and we'll always have elements of both. But actually, what we're shifting to and seeing more and more, and actually need to embrace, is the values of new power. So actually, how can informal power be used much more loosely? How can we be much more agile in how we come together and we make things happen? Openness, collaboration, crowd wisdom. I love this term, crowd wisdom. The idea of actually coming together and converge people's thinking, and you come up with a collective crowd wisdom, and actually how powerful is that, and how much more engaging is the crowd wisdom than one wise owl telling us this is the way to be. And yes, we need people who are really good at saying X, Y, and Z to help provoke people, and there's a role for that. But actually we really need the crowd wisdom as well. We really need the sharing. Radical transparency, really interesting. So people want to know what's going on. People want to know what's behind the information. And do we think this is any different in our workplaces? It's not. But how much do people actually have access to? We control information quite often. We give them access to what we think they need to know rather than what they might need to know. And yes, there are constraints. Yes, there are things we can't share. But there's probably a lot more that we can share. And what do we really need to keep private, and what don't we need to keep private? So for me, the new and the old power stuff is really important, and that leads on to the next slide, which is around what Julian calls dynamic tension, which is around actually these two things are coming together, they are colliding, they are overlapping, and actually what we get is this energy, this friction between them. So on the one side, you've got this hierarchical model of power where things have a process and a way of working and sort of structures that have been established for years. People have to have permission to do things. People have to talk. People have to ask. They have to kind of stick within their job role. They have to work in a certain way in certain hours, to this structure where people can access anything they want at any time personally on the internet. They can literally say, right, I want to know I want everything there is to know about oranges, or whatever it might be. That's a stupid example, but you can find out anything you want to know. You can connect to anyone in the world, and I will talk about that and some personal experiences, and also ask Kev to share some of his in a minute. But I think it's really important to not be naive that this is going on, and this is part of the stuff linked to the workplace and generational stuff as well, because it's definitely not about one generation works one way and one works the other. You see both in both, but it's about them coming together, and what does that mean for us. But also, for me, there's an energy between these things overlapping, and what can we do to enhance that and really use the positive energy that could be there as well. So it doesn't have to be negative friction always, because there's a role for more of a structured piece, but there's an absolute role for this more social hierarchy, more social network, where information flows, where people are able to connect and co-create and collaborate. So if we can just go to the next slide, please. Oh, fabulous. Okay, so if you just press it again, some writing should come up, Paul. Thank you. So I just want to talk a little bit more linked to the social age around kind of the power of what that allows us to do, and how we're able to connect with what's going on around us, really. And I wanted to share at this point some of my sort of experiences as well, because I think we get caught up in kind of social media, and social media is part of the social platforms we can use, but it's not just about social media, it's about online communities, about digital tech, it's about all the apps and the things that we can use to help us and enable us, all this portable, lightweight, synchronizable technology that's able to kind of be taken anywhere with us. That's the stuff that enables us, not just Twitter or Facebook. They're the things that are everywhere right now, but there'll be something else in 10 years' time that we don't know what it is. So it is, for me, about actually how do we use that for good, not just in society, but in the workplace, to deliver better public services, whether that be health and social care, whether that be fire, whether that be the policing, crime and justice, whatever it is, really. And here are some things I wanted to sort of talk about, I guess, around my experience of using social media. So, and using social platforms. I think that I've kind of become increasingly interested in how can people network together, but not just network within a network, but network the network. and connect the hashtags and actually just reach out to people and lead with generosity and the real power of that. So if we're doing that kind of work, actually, I'm able to work with people all over the world. And I was saying to him the other day about having a conversation with Jeremy Scribbins, who's the futurologist. I think he's actually on the chat, he was before. And actually said, isn't Jeremy in Australia? And I was just like, yeah, I just Skyped him. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't a big deal. It was a great conversation. It was brilliant that Jeremy was really happy to connect. But for me, I think just reaching out and having those conversations is like symptomatic of how people think and work now. They don't think, okay, so that person's got loads of followers, that person is like this big figurehead, I can't possibly contact them. Because in the past it would have been like authors of books. You would kind of go for book signing and maybe say hello to them if they signed your book. Now you can tweet them. Like John Stephen, who wrote Working Out Loud, probably gets really annoyed with my kind of constant tweeting because I'm obsessed with that right now. But actually there is definitely something around how it's opened up and democratized everything, and how some of that stuff is really going to be important for us going forward and for the future. So I think social platforms are a great way for us to lead, for us to connect, for us to share, for us to co-create. And Dominic, I wonder at this point if it's worth just doing a quick check-in on social media. Is that possible, just to kind of see what people are saying?
Hey Claire, yes, really enjoy what you're saying there. I'm just conscious of time as well. We've around 10 minutes left. So Lily, are you able to come onto the panelists and just discuss what you've seen? And Paul, I don't know if you can also bring in some of the thoughts that have come through the chat. I know that Kevin is having an interesting conversation with people on the chat as well. So
yes, shall social media go first?
yes, please. That'd be brilliant.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Claire, for such a fascinating overview. Yeah, people are still really soaking up everything that you're saying. There's lots of retweets going on and lots of picture sharing, which is fab. One comment from a person on Twitter saying how much they love the idea of crowd wisdom, how it flattens hierarchy as people bringing ideas to support progress. You know, people are really loving the idea of democratization of information and people being able to get involved in communities globally. It's really inspirational stuff, so people are really enjoying that.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we're just thinking about time, Dominic. Shall I just really quickly do the generational stuff and then pass over to Kev?
That'd be brilliant. Thanks, Claire.
Okay, sorry, getting carried away. Right, so we can just go to the next slide, and if you just press it again, it will come up for the fab. So, I was kind of trying to think what I wanted to say around this and what I wanted to say around kind of the multi-generational workplace that we live in, because what I didn't want to say was we've got millennials, we've got Generation Z, Generation X, we've got baby boomers, they're all this, that and the other, and characterize people, because that isn't helpful, that isn't kind of a useful way to think about this stuff. But I think the one thing I need to say about this, and would like to say about this, is I think we have to accept, though, that we're living in a society where in our workplace we have, for the first time, 4/5, depending on how you look at it, generations working together, with Generation Z, who are like 16 today, being in our workplaces and really kind of disrupting and changing things. And that's not because they're doing that to be awkward or anything. They've got a very different way of thinking because of the way they've been brought up with technology. But you can get that disruptive thinking from people who are in all these generations too. But actually there's an opportunity here as we get more and more people with that thinking, more and more people who see the social age and see the social context to actually harness that and utilise that. So I guess just in a nutshell, that's what I'd say. So I'll pass over to you, Kev.
Great, thanks Claire. Right, and I've got the power of control. Brilliant. So I guess then the question is, does any of this apply to healthcare, social care, public sector, public service? And one of the interesting conversations that we're having in the chat is that does the politicised system that we work within stop us from doing some of this fancy stuff that that organisations that I've already referenced can do? Well, I think the system that we're in is really tough to work in, I think it takes huge amounts of both high levels of both imagination and passion and resilience to be able to get some of this stuff done. And the photograph, the slide that's up there is Jos de Blok, who's the chief exec of Buurtzorg, which has been referenced in the chat a few times and in the little break we had a few minutes ago. Buurtzorg is a healthcare organisation. It delivers care in people's homes. It starts in Holland, and it's a very, very different type of organisation to the organisations that have traditionally delivered in Holland and deliver elsewhere. Loads of you will have heard about Buurtzorg already because they've been over here in the UK talking and explaining what they do, and there are some examples, I believe, in the UK of people trying out some of their techniques. The interesting thing that Jos talks about, the chief exec, is the personal bravery and resilience he needed to fight against the Dutch government when he was talking about things like how they're measured, how they're paid, those sort of things. So he personally has had to have a lot of battles to be able to continue to work in the way that they work. I mean, Buurtzorg are an amazing organisation. They've now got nearly 10,000 members of staff. They all work with no managers in teams of about 10 or 12. They are really creative because of that. They're really, by most measures, they're very effective and efficient. And they only have 45 back office staff, no managers, and 15 coaches. They trust people from the moment they employ them to do the job that they've employed them for and to do the right thing. And they don't think they need managers to check on people to do that. So I think that they're an amazing organisation delivering amazing care in lots and lots of different health systems. They work in politicised systems too, but definitely the leadership is really important. That personal kind of drive, obsession that Jos de Blok has had has meant that they've been able to thrive, and I think that's really important. And it's really important to recognise that that's the sort of system we're in, and it's really tough. And then the other example I just wanted to note as well of people that work in tough political and financial systems and still deliver. And this is the chief exec of davita. Davita are a renal care organisation in the States. They have over $13 billion turnover annually and are a Fortune 400 company. They're also an amazing democratic organisation. And this is Kent Thury, the chief exec. Kent will often wear Three Musketeers outfits at the staff dues. Is again a bit of a weird bloke, completely obsessed with delivering a purposeful life for the people that work in davita. He has some interesting ideas about how to bring people into the organisation, and everyone that gets employed by davita goes away for 2 days to think about how their own personal purpose, the reason why they are on this world, fits with davita's personal purpose, organisational purpose. They are a proper hard-nosed organisation that has the shareholders, all the financial constraints that they have, and they are financially very successful, but they deliver. How they deliver it is completely different to how most people deliver their organisations. One of the things that I really like about this organisation, about davita, is that they honour noble human behaviour. So when they give their awards out, they reward and honour people who do the right thing and are noble. Well worth having a look at more detail about what davita do. I've met the director of HR, Sharon, and they are really, really obsessive about being part of their communities and doing the right thing for people. And he's worth definitely watching on YouTube if you can find some stuff about him. But that does kind of get us to the point of where do we start? And this is potentially massive. This is potentially huge. It's too big to start, and it reminds me of the old story of the person throwing starfish that were washed up on the beach back into the sea, and someone saying, "Oh, you're never going to throw all those starfish back," and actually that person saying, "Well, I've helped this starfish and chucking one back." I think we have to start in little ways, and little ways that appreciate that power can be held by everybody. And it's not held by the few, but by the many. So the ways that we work together when we have meetings, the ways that we bring groups together, all that sort of stuff, we can be more participative, we can be more democratic, and we can, in those little ways, we can change the way that we interact, human to humans, with the people that are around us. What I'm going to do, close, because of time, I'm going to hand straight over to you now. And to go on to talk a little bit about Collaborate Out Loud.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you, Kev. So if we can just go to the Collaborating Out Loud slide, that would be fabulous. Ooh, we're going. There we go, next one, brilliant. If you just kind of, yes, that's fab. So I might get you to come in at points on this, Kev. I think this is really important that both our voices are heard in this space. So this is Kevin and I's attempt at experimenting with some of these ideas, some of the democratic and freedom-based principles. So Kevin and I met up in sort of September, had a coffee, and we're like, oh my God, imagine if we could. And this is the statement we came up with that day. So what we wanted to do was, actually, we wanted to pull people together to actually help to improve and shape public services for the future. We wanted to be able to experiment and do things differently. We wanted to do that in an open and democratic way. So we felt there was loads of people on the edge of public services, people within public services, that could come together around thinking about OD and leadership and change. So we thought, actually, let's just start this. And Kevin's like, it's like living out loud, this. And I was like, no, it's collaborating out loud. So that's how the name was sort of hatched. And this is, I guess, sort of a bit of a mission statement for the community. But I think Kevin and I talk about being co-founders of this, and this is an experiment, and we don't have all the answers, but we'd love you to join in and find them with us. But actually, this community is owned by its members, so I know there's people like Julia and Becky on the chat on Twitter that are part of this, and I'd love to hear their views too. So we're working with a group of people really democratically to try to shape something that we hope can be a service to public services, but test the process of collaboration and also test what do we mean by democracy and freedom. And it's really, really interesting. So really quickly, I'm going to share some of our early findings and then give Kevin a quick opportunity to just jump in on that as well. So if we could just go to the next slide. Fab. So if you press it again, it will bring up, yeah, fabulous. So for me, I think it's interesting because it's actually really hard. It's really hard work to do this stuff. And I don't think we ever thought it was easy, but it is really hard, and you have to kind of really put the effort in. And I think that last point about just saying it's a democratic community doesn't make it so. You really have to pay attention to what you want to happen and how you want to do that. Because people look to Kevin and I because we've started this, and we could go off and shape this in all sorts of directions. But actually there's an opportunity here to shape it together, and that's really what we want to do. And that middle point about slowing down to speed up, Kevin's really good at making you do this, because I'm like a million miles an hour, let's do it now. But actually there was a lot of reflection in the last meeting of this group, and actually I think that will really help the group to now shift forward and start to work through some challenges. So I think the thing for me, first point, it's hard, but it's worth it. Next slide. Brilliant. This to me is quite interesting because, and this came out of a conversation I had with Kevin the other day, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot since. So we're talking about collaboration here, but democracy and freedom means collaboration. And for me, collaboration is emotional, collaboration is personal. And actually we have to really embrace that as leaders, because we have to be able to say, this is bringing something up in me that I'm really not sure what it's about, or I know what it's about, because we have to address that stuff if we're going to work in a more democratic, free and open way. We need people to be able to talk about that, show those vulnerabilities, and that's really hard, and that goes against what many people have been taught or how they work, and it's scary, but actually collaboration, democracy and freedom isn't just kind of a processing, it's emotional, it's human, and I think we need to embrace that. Next slide. So this one for me, again, it's just about kind of, there's a few things for me about knowing your purpose. We have to be really clear on the purpose, have some really interesting conversations around that, and actually making sure we stick to what that purpose is around supporting and being of service to public services. And we're working through how we do that, but stay democratic, stay independent, and stay free as an entity. I think there's something around working hard not to get in the way, because for me, I can see things that I've done in previous lives. I've probably got in the way of things happening. I've had an interesting debate around gatekeepers and networks on Twitter this morning. What we need is enablers and facilitators of networks, and we need to make sure collaborating out loud is an enabler. And this is the same in organisations. So I think it's working hard not to get in the way as well, just being really aware of that and self-awareness. So next slide, that's okay? Fab. So this slide just tells you how you can get involved, because Kevin and I wanted today to be a conversation, a start of a conversation around how we do some of this stuff. And I think that point around how does this work in the political environment that we're working in, where we've got local politicians, national politicians, all these drivers taking place. We've got kind of loads of history behind public services. We've got kind of the NHS that is absolutely valued by the communities it serves. How does all that sort of play into this? But also there's a real strength in that. And for me, it goes back to that collaboration, that engagement, democracy and freedom, and it's engaging right across all those spectrums. So Kevin, I don't know if I wanted to just let you, I just wanted to let you give some final thoughts, and then we can kind of sum up.
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, I know Dom's also very keen that our time is up.
Yes.
It is an experiment collaborating out loud. And I think what Claire and I have learned is that all this democratic approaches to working together are things that we need to explore. And we need high levels of obsession about it, high levels of imagination, and probably also high levels of bravery as well in there. There is a quote that I don't really want to say more about collaborating out loud. I think Claire said as much as we need, but please feel free to get involved. There's a quote from Kent Theory from Davita that I really like, that just kind of says a little bit about maybe what we should do. And he says, if this is the world that we want tomorrow, what do we need to change today? I think it kind of says, well, actually, guys, if we know what we want, we need to do something about it now, regardless of how tough it might be, regardless of what the consequences to some extent might be. We've got to kind of crack on and do something ourselves. And so Claire and I are hopefully doing a little bit of that.
Yes, with your help.
So thank you very much, Claire, and thank you, Kev. Just want to be conscious of people's time, so we have kind of slipped over a little bit. So thank you very much for sharing your stories and the work that you guys are doing. There's been a lot of conversation both on Twitter and on the chat room here that guess that people want to potentially have these conversations going forward. So if we can follow up with the people that have connected on here, that'd be absolutely brilliant. So I'd like to thank everybody for their time. We'll be sharing this session and the notes from today's chat, and also some of the Twitter activity on the Edge platform. So we look forward to speaking to you all soon, and hope you have a nice weekend, and speak to you soon. Thank you, everybody.